Hey guys, Omni here. This week has concluded the first season of Loki, and it was quite the ride. If you haven't seen my reaction to the finale, it's up on the channel. I'll link it up in the top here for you guys if you want to check it out if you haven't already. And this brings us to our final breakdown of the episode, going through the Easter eggs, details we might have missed for episode 6, the season 1 finale of Loki. You know, while the episode wasn't packed with action, the stakes have never been higher, and I like that it came down to, much like some bits of WandaVision, a conversation. The ship of Theseus versus the red and blue pill. Do you go back to your perfect simulated life with peace, with harmony, or do you wake up and deal with the consequences of choosing this reality, freeing yourself from this illusion and taking charge of your own life? I like that. I liked it a lot. I thought that the episode was fantastic. The reveal of who was behind the scenes was just, honestly, I didn't think they'd go that route. I didn't. I'll be honest. Like I thought, despite all the clues there, I was so like dead set on how they had really kind of set up the field with WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, you know, playing to general audiences, not trying to bait too much into the comic book lore. And while all the clues were there, I thought, just like with Mephisto, maybe it was just probably some nuggets here and there to satiate, some Easter eggs, if you will, nothing more. But nope, they didn't. They dropped the Kang bomb on us early. You know, we already knew he was coming down the pipeline. That was one thing that kind of made us stand out from the whole Mephisto train, at least, was that we at least knew for a fact this character was coming. But I think a lot of us were so afraid to think that they were going to do that, despite all the clues, just like not wanting to be wrong or anything like that, and kind of going with the metaphorical themes of the show, expected a different outcome. But no, they hit us with that train. They hit us with that reveal. They hit us with the backstory of not only this character, but the TVA, what they are exactly protecting the universe from, and putting this decision on how to handle that in the hands of these two Lokis. And I loved that back and forth. It's a lot of fun, guys. So with that all being said, let's just go ahead and get into Eric Voss's breakdown for season 1's finale, episode 6. Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Loki episode 6, the season finale for All Time Always, which deprives us of Jet Ski Mobius, but makes up for it with Jonathan Majors' wickedly talented performance as he who remains a variant of Kang the Conqueror. Look, there's so much deeper meaning hidden in all the details of this episode, so let's break down this finale frame by frame to celebrate me getting a theory right for a change. Also, you can get our Loki-inspired merch at newrockstarsmerch.com.
Mine still has not come in yet, and I'm sad.
And Mobius on a jet
Hopefully
ski
I'll have it for our
Mobius
live
closing
stream
fast, so you
Saturday.
gotta jump on
We'll
this,
see.
NewRockstarsMerch.com. Okay, over the Marvel Studios title, we actually hear the music of It's Been a Long, Long Time by Harry James and Helen Forrest, which first played in Captain America the Winter Soldier, and then more memorably in the final scene of Avengers Endgame. That was the moment Steve Rogers created one of the many variant branches that could have destabilized He Who Remains' sacred timeline. Then we hear other iconic sounds from MCU past, which at first play over the character as they appear in the Marvel title animation, but then build into a cacophony as the timeline orbits around his citadel in a flat circle, time unfolding all at once from his perspective. But because I'm insane, I've broken down pretty much everything hidden in here. Iron Man's repulsor, Falcon congratulating Ant-Man during Civil War,
Way to go, Tic Tac! Way to go, Tic Tac!
Hope Van Dyne flying to Scott Lang and Ant-Man,
That's how you punch. That's how you punch.
Hulk roaring, T'Challa's salute in Black Panther,
Rest in peace, my man.
Spider-Man's web shooter, Scott's first meeting with Falcon and Ant-Man,
You wouldn't have heard of me. No, you wouldn't have heard of me.
Natasha talking to Coulson in Avengers,
Let me put you on hold. Let me put you on hold.
Peter Quill in Guardians of the Galaxy,
Dance off, bro! Dance off, bro! Me and you.
Thor in Ragnarok,
I still love that moment.
He's a friend from work.
Cap versus Cap in Endgame,
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Mjolnir, I think reverting to Cap in Endgame, younger Hank Pym in Ant-Man,
I'll show you ferocity
and I'll show you ferocity.
Carol Danvers and Captain Marvel.
Higher, further, faster, baby. Higher, further, faster, baby. That's right.
Loki to Thanos in Infinity War.
We have a Hulk. We have a Hulk.
Korg to Loki in Ragnarok.
We're gonna jump on that spaceship and get out of here. You wanna come? We're about to jump on that ginormous spaceship. You wanna come?
Bucky in Winter Soldier.
Who the hell is Bucky? Who the hell is Bucky?
Peter Quill planning in Guardians of the Galaxy.
I have part of a plan.
Natasha to Loki in Avengers.
I got red in my ledger. I'd like to wipe it out.
Doctor Strange to Dormammu.
Dormammu, I've come to bargain.
Vision to Ultron.
I was born yesterday.
Hulk to Loki in Avengers.
Puny God. Puny God.
Gosh,
Thor, that
so
shield
much.
Big guy in Thor.
Bigger. You're big. Fought bigger.
Fury's speech in Avengers.
There was an idea. Stark knows this.
Hawkeye's speech to Wanda in Ultron.
You are an Avenger.
Loki's final words in Infinity War.
That's my favorite moment in Age of Ultron, I think.
Banner's big line in Avengers.
My secret cat. I'm always. That's my secret cat. I'm always angry.
Hank Pym and Ant-Man and the Wasp.
You sent my suit through the mail.
And it sounds like the voice of Carly Morgenthau in there from Falcon Winter Soldier. And Caecilius
Yeah, I can't
to
really
Doctor
make that one out
Strange.
at all.
Time is the true enemy of us all. Time kills everything.
And then it ends with a subtle baby cry.
Wow, you can bring that back around
This one
to
is
this
actually hard to find,
show
but it is the
itself.
sound of
Time.
baby Loki crying in that flashback
Time
of
is
Thor,
the,
Odin taking
enemy of
memories
all.
Frost Giant Ward.
In the end.
Now you'll notice there's a bit of a Loki bias among these, since this history is being filtered through the perspective of a witness observing Loki's entire life start to finish in particular. Then we pull out from our solar system, now hearing a lecture from philosopher Alan Watts about time. Watts argued that time isn't really the past causing the events of the future, but in truth just an imaginary concept that we perceive from where we are in the present, similar to the non-linear way He Who Remains perceives time. And then we zoom out from the galaxy and we hear Neil Armstrong's first words on the moon. Meanwhile, a mysterious ship soars past us. Now this doesn't look like any of the Guardians of the Galaxy ships, nor one that NASA would use, or one that I think Sword would use, especially this far out in the solar system, but I'm thinking it could
I noticed
be more
that too, but I didn't really
powerful
think
Kang
much of it.
enemies, the Fantastic Four. Then we hear the voice of climate activist Greta Thunberg. As all of the galaxies, our known universe appears to be contained within this blue sphere, which then condenses and then explodes. Maybe a depiction of a Big Bang or a future Big Bang, an event that would have created the Infinity Stones. Then we hear the voice of activist Malala Yousafzai. And then the voice of Nelson Mandela. As Tchaikovsky's music from Swan Lake plays, representing a battle between light and dark, like the apathetic yet still benevolent variant of Kang versus the darker, more menacing variants who end up conquering in the end. And we realize everything we have just seen has been set inside of one black hole that neighbors another, as the music shifts like a radio dial to Beethoven's Für Elise. Which he wrote as an ode to his lover, perhaps reflecting the way Kang's actions may have been für Ravonna. Everything we're seeing here is really an astronomical geography of the spatial relationship between these universes, which He Who Remains later describes as stacked on top of each other. And then we dive into that second black hole, a separate reality now, as we hear the voice of classic Loki from last episode. And then we briefly see one planet colliding into another. Perhaps this was Lamentus 1. And then we stretch into a Bifrosty 2001 Space Odyssey Stargate as we hear first Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf's 2006 speech.
Jesse. Motivated by women throughout the world.
And then Vision's big line from WandaVision.
What is grief if not love persevering? What is grief if not love persevering?
And then poet Maya Angelou. That was from a poem with verses about her history being rewritten, which does happen to Sylvie and Loki at the end of this episode when no one remembers them. And the final things we hear during this montage are Sylvie's voice from last episode.
Open your eyes! Open your eyes!
And then some Morse code beeping. This could be the 1962 Morse message that was beamed out to space. And we see the Citadel at the end of time with this cracked design, which is also reflected in He Who Remains time twister on his wrist and his tableau goo. Looks a lot like kintsugi pottery, representing how He Who Remains likely had to piece it together from broken shards of that past multiversal war to create this kind of neutral ground, and foreshadowing the way that this timeline will splinter and crack once more in the episode's end. Flanking this entrance are two giant hourglasses. And staying true to this series' Wizard of Oz parallels, their slow walk down the hall does mirror the nervous walk to meet the wizard, just to reveal that man behind the curtain is a far more comedic figure than we expected. But before we even get there, Miss Minute scares the shit out of us in this chamber with looming hooded figures with clocks for faces. Kind of like a creepier form of what Miss Minutes essentially is, a clock-faced greeter. And note how later she's late to meet Renslayer, therefore she cannot be in two places at once. And she offers them this deal.
He's worked it out so we can reinsert both of y'all back into the timeline in a way that won't disrupt things.
Similar to the offer made in The Matrix to the humans. Really, this whole episode is kind of playing out like the architect scene in Matrix Reloaded, but
just more entertaining.
To watch. Miss Minutes offers Loki his chance to rule.
You can kill Thanos.
Yeah, Natalie Holt's violin theme returns, the music that played over Loki watching his own life back in episode 1, but not to his own death, but to the deaths of Frigga and Odin. That is who he's really thinking about in this moment, a chance to see them in Thor again. Now, trailer footage showed some shots of King Loki on the Asgardian throne and back at the top of Stark Tower. Presumably these were going to be shown here as Loki imagined these possibilities. Now, back at the TVA, Renslayer notices Mobius ring stains on the table, something that he did not remember leaving, which could connect to his total memory reset at the end of this episode, making me wonder if the TVA could have been reset before all this many times, similar to how in The Matrix that was actually the 6th incarnation of the Matrix. Ravonna gets a mystery file.
He thinks this'll be more useful.
Who?
Yeah, notice how here Renslayer does not seem to know who He Who Remains is, but in the later scene, she suddenly seems more agitated and she gripes that he's the only one with free will. So what did she learn from this file? Well, later Mobius reveals that Renslayer actually came from FDR High School in Fremont, Ohio in 2018, where she was apparently the principal based on her having an office, and that Ohio State diploma, listing her name as Rebecca Tormenay, an alias that Renslayer actually uses in the comics when she goes to the year 1903. So I love that she goes from a name sounding like Terminate to one sounding like Slayer. Now on her desk you'll see more pens like the one that we saw, and around this school are posters of FDR, but also Eleanor Roosevelt in her office, and then a bunch more posters of coat drives, and this being homecoming week. And that is interesting because homecoming is of course normally in the autumn, but autumn 2018 in the MCU would have been a few months after the snap, which occurred in the spring of that year. So perhaps this coat drive is for displaced kids and families during the blip, and the reason she joined the TVA could have been blip related, because Ravonna Renslayer is of course Kang's love interest in the comics, so maybe here in the show he has something over her, like she could have been destined to have been dusted, and that could have left behind a child who died without her. So to keep her sacred timeline self undusted and that kid safe, she continues to work for Kang as his objectified doll.
I have to believe they had a reason.
But here, upon learning this truth, she leaves through this time door.
Where are you gonna go?
In search of free will.
Which could be her searching for a reality with a different Kang variant who might give her a better deal, which could lead to the Kang the Conqueror, who overtakes the TVA in the final scene. By the way, most of us have a goal that we want to accomplish, but for some reason we haven't yet. Right?
All right, what's the ad read?
It seems overwhelming, or you're just not excited enough to start. Well, the Heroes Journal helps by turning your goal into a quest, and thanks to Heroes Journal for sponsoring this episode. Based on the best of goal-setting psychology and the story theory behind your favorite fandoms, the Heroes Journal will help you discover the story you tell about about yourself and define the quest you want
I'm curious
to
about
undertake. Whether
this.
your goals revolve around improving your health or taking a step forward in your career.
This
or
is the
finally
first time I've
undertaking a
actually
big
seen
creative
whatever this
project, the
thing
Hero's
is.
Journal guides you along the journey to achieving your goal. Check it out. Each page contains unique art that progresses as you turn the page. There are dragons and castles, other fun fantasy imagery.
Is it like
that
a
puts
fill in your own
personal
story?
challenge into a more heroic context. And finishing that novel seems a lot
I
cooler
gotcha.
when you are doing it in Arthurian style. And the
It's like a
exterior of the
motivational
journal
way
is
to
just
like
super
have
cool. It
set
feels
your
more like a
goals.
sacred tome than just a journal. And what's
That's
really cool
interesting.
about the Hero's Journal is that it builds a positive narrative about productivity versus, you know, like a shame-based narrative. And you get to feel good about all the tiny steps that you're taking on a daily basis. So the Hero's Journal is
I need a
available for
book that
purchase
tells
now.
me
Just
I'm
head to
doing okay.
heroesjournal.co
Do it.
or click the link in the description and use our promo code NewRockstars for your 10% off.
Oh, no, that
Back in the
sounds pretty
Citadel,
interesting.
Loki and Sylvie reach a chamber with these ceiling cogs and pendulums, bells, but then on the floor, a depiction of the lunar cycle.
Yeah.
All of these are various ways of keeping time, but also timekeeper statues. 3 still standing, but a 4th one shattered. In the comics, there was a 4th timekeeper named the Oracle of Siwa, who was exiled to ancient Egypt for informing the Fantastic Four of events to come. Perhaps this statue was shattered during the past multiversal war between Kangs, and He Who Remains couldn't put it back together. Or this could be some evidence of a past attempted uprising in one of the past TVA resets, where one of the timekeepers betrayed He Who Remains to help a variant get to him, and then He Who Remains responded by expelling that one faulty timekeeper and destroying his statue that represented him. But then the man behind the curtain we've been talking about is revealed.
He Who Remains. She still calling me that? Creepy. Right. I like it.
Yes, He Who Remains is actually the name of the elderly TVA caretaker at the Citadel of the End of Time who builds the Timekeepers in the comics. And although he's never explicitly named Kang in this episode, He Who Remains is 100% confirmed to be a variant of Kang the Conqueror. Jonathan Majors was cast as Kang for Ant-Man the Wasp Quantumania. He is dressed like Immortus, who is another form of Kang from the comics. He said that his variant was from the 31st century, when Kang Nathaniel Richards was born. He calls himself a conqueror. And yeah, this pays off all the clues the show has given us, from Renslayer to Eliath to the Tower for Kang Enterprises, the shell company, Renslayer's ID of A23, which was their appearance together in the comics Avengers 23. And notice how here the light casts his face in blue like his comic book look. Now notice he eats an apple, which could mean a lot of things. First, it's a symbol of Newtonian knowledge, you know, boink. And later on, in his office is this chalkboard with equations that use integrals. And if I remember from calculus AB in high school, this is calculus, and Sir Isaac Newton is credited as a co-creator of calculus. But the apple also recalls Doctor Strange's use of an apple to first demonstrate time manipulation in the MCU, but it also reminds us of that episode 2 word problem from Miss Minutes that asked about the last MCU big bad, Thanos, using him eating apples as an example. Of course, apples are also associated with the forbidden fruit of the Garden of Eden in the book of Genesis, used to tempt Adam and Eve by the serpent, and in this episode, He Who Remains
He is also
offers
trying to
these
tempt
Adam
them.
and Eve figures chances to be gods, and refers to himself a few times this episode as the devil. Now, to pull off this effect of He Who Remains dodging Sylvie's blows, Hiddleston and DiMartino must have had to shoot their action on a green screen and then had to be layered into that elevator with Majors. But this render was left just rough enough around the edges that leaves the characters and us feeling emotionally detached from this seemingly untouchable immortal. He Who Remains reveals
Yeah, I did
this
think
is
that
all scripted,
shot kind
and
of
we
weird.
see if you look closely at his book that Sylvie is ID'd as variant L1190. And notice how he lifts that book. I like how he does a subtle little adjustment of his time twister to draw attention to it, since this is the key to controlling the room. And I think he ultimately wants Sylvie to take it and kill him so that he can respawn in a more dangerous form. Like, I think the Council of Kangs know that Loki and Sylvie's union make them true Nexus beings that threaten their empire. And so He Who Remains really feigns this candidness with this phony offer to replace him, while really he is driving a wedge between them the whole time.
It's all a manipulation. Interesting that your head would go to that. Sylvie!
You think you can trust this guy?
He Who Remains later says,
Without the TVA, everything burns.
Jonathan Majors is having a blast, hamming up the eccentricities in this jaded, sing-songy tone. He's constantly moving to new physicalities just to punctuate and liven this monologue, kind of like a guy on the last day of his job. Super dangerous, super fun to watch. You could actually compare him to Heath Ledger's Joker, who also says similar words.
Everything burns.
And when he's seated at his desk, he's framed with his head in the middle of his spiral window in the background, kind of like the whole
halo
universe orbiting around his egomaniacal personality. And he explains a variant of himself in the 31st century discovered parallel universes the same time as other variants.
For a while, there was peace. Narcissistic, self-congratulatory peace. I love your shoes. I love your hair. Oh, man. Nice nose. Thanks, man.
Yeah, Majors might be joking about his own recognizable nose, but really he knows he is sexy. We see how the Kang variants invented time doors, reset charges, the computer's printing sticks the TVA use, but they ended up in this multiversal war, meaning that Miss Minutes animation was actually telling the truth about that, just that it wasn't the Timekeepers who ended it, but he who remains apparently repelling these even worse evil Kangs. The figurines shapeshift into prayerful and grateful poses. He says,
I've lived 1,000,000 lifetimes. I've gone through every scenario. This is the only way.
Similar to how Doctor Strange said that he saw 14,605 future outcomes, but that only one was a successful way forward.
There was no other way.
Now, of course, He Remains' offer is very much like a Willy Wonka style offer to them to take over his job, but I love how Majors nods at that with his pose here.
Or you're a liar.
Or I'm a liar.
Yeah, laying it on his fist, just like the Willy Wonka meme.
Oh,
and as
damn.
He says he is older than he looks and that this game is for the young and hungry, the camera pulls back from him, making him look smaller and smaller, more diminished in the window spiral, as if his influence is appearing to fade. And then he snaps at Sylvie.
Grow up! Grow up, Sylvie! Murderer! Hypocrite!
Similar to how Caecilius called out the Ancient One.
Hypocrite!
Because among sorcerers, no one really has the moral high
Also,
ground.
when
Then everything shifts in this scene.
Charlie snaps on
a chance to do them for a good
or Willy Wonka
reason.
snaps on Charlie.
We just crossed the threshold.
Yeah, that thunder was the sound of the sacred timeline breaking up. And fitting to use thunder for that, because as it branches, it does look a lot like heat lightning, evoking the moment the Ancient One slowed down time in the moment of her death. A similar moment where she, just like He Who Remains here, could not foresee beyond that point. So what
Gosh,
caused
so many
this?
parallels.
Was this pact with another Kang? Or could He Who
To
Remains
Doctor
justifying
Strange.
free will subversion have been the thing that Sylvie decided she was just gonna kill him no matter what Loki told her? Either way, that break makes it so that when Loki returns to the TVA, it has already warped and reset so that a different Kang is now ruling over this one. He
That makes
Remains
sense.
removes his time
That makes
twister
sense
and
now.
slides
Okay.
it over, but notice how his gesture, again sliding his hand across the table, and the framing makes it look like it is still on his hand, which could be a clue that this offer is really a bait and switch because both alternatives lead to his victory. Loki and Sylvie duel, and upon their early clash, He Who Remains jumps in his seat in the corner in excitement, which is similar to how Palpatine loved watching Luke and Vader fight. And before that, Anakin and Dooku fight, because
Do
either
it.
way, the mastermind
Kill
has
him.
already won. It's so
Kill him
tragic
now.
to see these two fight, largely in the way it parallels what Loki told Sylvie as an answer to what love is back in episode 3.
Love is a dagger. It's a weapon to be wielded far away or up close. You can see yourself in it. It's beautiful until it makes you bleed. But ultimately, when you reach for it,
It isn't real.
Yeah, Loki wields his love for Sylvie up close and can see himself in her, but she makes him bleed. And when he reaches for it, it isn't real. Instead, classic Loki's wisdom really reigns supreme.
The blades are worthless in the face of a Loki sorcery.
But despite all this, Loki does make a key concession.
All I know is I don't want to hurt you. I don't want a throne. I just want you to be okay.
Signaling that he learned the core lesson that Sylvie laid out for him earlier this season.
This isn't about you.
But as he tumbles back through the time door into the TVA theater, the window lights on the floor go in opposing directions, which is odd because presumably they're coming from the same exterior light source. The way these lights paralleled Loki and Mobius's opposition in episode 4, they now mirror the opposition between Loki and Sylvie. But on a more literal level, it also shows how this new TVA that Loki has found himself in does not revolve according to the same gravity as the old one did. So Sylvie's stabs He Who Remains and he winks and says,
See you soon.
Yeah, back in episode 4, after Sylvie beheaded the Timekeeper android and the other two shut down, if you listen closely, you could hear a voice whisper, "See you soon."
Oh, wow.
Yes, the voice of Kang, He Who Remains, who was calling his shit
God
back in,
damn.
and now his wink confirming it to her that she truly has had no free will in this battle. The sacred timeline splits into branches of branches of branches, and the chronomonitor screen confirms that many of these branches overlap with each other. And looking back at the cosmic version of it, some regions grow a bright red, which could be the incursion that we saw in WandaVision's post-credit scene, and been the cause
Oh, that
of
hurt my
Wanda
eyes.
suddenly hearing her children calling to her from another reality.
Dude, I'm so hyped for where this shit's going, man.
So yes, we are looking at the multiverse of madness that Doctor Strange 2 will take place in, where the Scarlet Witch will be the rising threat he has to face. Perhaps even the logical basis for how Alfred Molina, Doc Ock, and Jamie Foxx Electro will appear in Spider-Man No Way Home. Hopefully we get a trailer for that very soon. Meanwhile, Loki finds the TVA change as he passes a bunch of hunters who don't really care about him. It's hard to tell, but one of these must be Hunter K5E.
Copy. Reporting to the armory, sir.
Listed in the credits as Eugene Cordero, meaning Casey must have either got promoted or in this alternate TVA, instead of being a desk clerk, he gets to be a hunter. And then in the archives, he finds Mobius and B-15 who have no idea who he is, which
This
is really
hurt.
odd because even before he was a detained variant, Loki was the freaking god of mischief with an infamous reputation, so this must have been a hard memory wipe reset. The Timekeeper statues have been replaced with He Who Remains variant. In this case, it is Kang the Conqueror, which we know because he's wearing his Conqueror wardrobe. This might remind you of that final twist in Tim Burton's 2001 Planet of the Apes with the Lincoln Memorial, but just by looking at this,
Yeah.
while the TVA may change on a dime, its true creator
Just fucking
is
spit
now
all over
Mr.
myself with
Sylvie
that
for
laugh.
all time, always. And the credits confirm that Loki will return for a second season, and with Kang's confirmed appearance in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania in February 2023, I'm thinking season 2 could come at the end of 2022 or maybe in the first weeks of 2023 to lead into that film. Ant-Man and the Wasp
that'd be
left a
cool.
quantum realm
Let's hope
city in the
so.
background that I've been theorizing could be Kang's Kingdom of Chronopolis. And Kang in Quantumania could live beyond that film to be the villain of a future Fantastic Four film or an Avengers Secret Wars conflict. But whenever we see Kang next,
You
with
know-
an
you never
actor
know.
as talented and versatile as Jonathan Majors, it would not surprise me if he brings a whole new characterization to his Conqueror variant. We still have much to learn about him, and that is what makes him so dangerous and so delightful. I want to thank you all so much for joining me on these breakdowns of Loki. This show is a true
Goddamn.
masterclass in world building and storytelling, and I hope the details and connections I've been able to find have enriched the viewing experience for you. Don't worry, I'll be back with plenty more Marvel theories and future breakdowns, so be sure to subscribe to New Rockstars, follow me
If
on
you
Instagram
are
and
not
Twitter at EAVoss, follow New
Follow and
Rockstars.
subscribe
Thank
to
you again
these
for
guys,
watching.
man.
Bye.
Oh, goddamn. Okay, that clears up a couple of things here, because obviously, if you saw my reaction, there's some points I was not too keen on or didn't quite pick up completely. And it's still unclear because, like I've said a couple times talking to people in the comments about certain things, the multiverse has happened. There has been evidence of the TVA having been reset before. I still don't know if I completely believe we have multiple TVAs yet. It's possible, given what came up there that I missed. You know, the crackling in the background, what exactly that meant, and how quickly those branches can actually form. Because when I was thinking he went through the portal, Kang hadn't died yet, so I didn't think there was any universes he could have went into through that portal just yet. But what I misunderstood was the lightning crackle was the part in which branches were occurring. So that opens the door from that moment forward for there to be other universes, because the TVA is too occupied with everything else that's going on, as well as Kang is also not doing his job right now to Immortus, whatever you want to call him, He Who Remains, is not actively keeping the timeline contained. So I was under the impression that it only mattered after he died. So, that all being said, one thing that still kind of confuses me about this episode in particular, and I didn't really think about it all that much until Eric Voss brought it up in here, and then rewatching it from a different perspective this time around. So we have that imagery in the opening of this episode of us hearing all of these lines from various MCU related films as we're seeing the Big Bang occur, the expansion of our galaxy as we come out of our solar system, and then eventually we exit this black hole, which is neighboring another black hole. And then we go into that one, and then we only hear the lines from the Disney Plus shows, a couple of other real world things as we come in, and then we see the sacred timeline. So that's a little contradictory to what Kang has been saying. Like in his own little monologue where he's explaining his past and all that, he says he weaponized Alioth and he ended the multiversal war by condensing the timeline into one. And by doing that, like, Alioth was a being that was created from all these temporal displacements and energy from the war itself between all these different timelines and universes, and created this being that's able to destroy and consume matter, time, space, all that jazz. And he weaponizes it to destroy the other universes, to condense everything to a singular timeline, to prevent a multiverse from existing, to prevent the end of existence. So he consolidates everything into a singular timeline, things to play out how he deems them to play out so that they do not lead to another multiversal war in the end, nor a bigger bad version of him to come into existence again. So he keeps this cycle going. But this cycle, this circle, the timeline, the sacred timeline, was in that second bauble. So was that saying that this timeline is separate from, like, because of those voids, those black holes, is what we've been watching already a separate timeline or already a separate universe? One thing I did kind of posit, like, while I was trying to formulate this, because I had to stop and get me some water because my throat was really starting to dry out there, so I had to stop the recording and come back to this. And while I was getting the water, I had this thought: what if that first universe we were coming out of is our universe? We're coming out of there, we're hearing all this MCU stuff, we're hearing all this junk, and what if we're coming out of our universe where all those are from films, and then we enter the MCU, like the actual MCU is a parallel universe to us where these things are all real. Just a fun little thought I thought I'd throw in there, because the way the show is explained, the multiverse and the TVA thing in the beginning where we saw Loki being brought in initially in episode 1, and then the way Kang describes it here, and if you take some of the knowledge from the comics as well, that the multiverse and the TVA's role is to be outside of it and govern all realities. In the comics, the TVA governs all realities and prevents, unnecessary interaction between them, as well as deviations from each one's internal timeline, all that stuff. So in the show, as what the two things that line up with what Miss Minutes told us in the beginning and what Kang told us in the end was that after the multiverse existed in the beginning, but like Kang explained, eventually variants of himself were able to figure out about their existence and then travel between them with these time doors, with these gates. We see him as he and his other variants have built these gates. And through that, the war initiated because some of them were not as nice, did not play well with others, was more mine than ours. So they conquered, they fought, and this particular Kang, in the chaos, weaponized the results of that chaos, which was the being called Alioth, which can decimate matter into nothing, and used it in the war to end that war, consolidating everything to a single universe, a single timeline. And Kang then created the TVA to monitor this timeline to prevent another multiverse from growing. Because if another universe grows from one of these branches, then it could lead to another war between the universe and in the end result in everything falling apart. But that itself would imply that the TVA, and going off of the comics, going off, again, the show's explanation, both with Miss Minutes and Kang, the TVA exists outside of the time stream, outside of the effects of these branches, unless there's interference with the one that created them, because that's still part of how that whole flow goes. And the person that kept that intact, kept the TVA intact, was Kang, but he took a step back at the end of this. Like we saw, he's like, oh, we've crossed the threshold. From here, I don't know what's going to happen, because that's really all up to you guys. Because right now, I've stopped doing what I'm doing. The TVA is not able to keep up with what you guys have done and unleashed upon the world. From this point forward, it's all up to a choice. Either you take my job and we stamp this out and everything flows on the way it's supposed to again. Taking my job, taking over the reins, keeping things in order. Or you let me die and everything just goes into chaos. But after he dies, after that crackle, after nothing is there to stop it, because the TVA at this point is well beyond their capabilities to stop these branches from happening at the rate that they're happening. The only thing that could stop this is somebody to take Kang's place and restructure these branches back into a singular timeline. So with Kang out of the picture, and now these branches growing off, these other variants of Kang that are now going to be unimpeded, at the moment that crackle happened and nobody's there to stop those pruning timelines, that's when Loki could have ended up in a new TVA. And now there can be multiple TVAs. But then that raises the question, if there were because some people seem to think that there were multiple TVAs even before this episode. And if that's the case, then there should be a multiversal war to begin with. If each universe already exists, but they're separate, and in the sacred timeline, there's multiple TVAs, and therefore there's multiple Kangs. Like, that's when the logic starts to fall apart. It's just like, it only makes sense if there is one timeline, one stream, and all the variants we've seen is just from the timeline trying its damnedest to create the multiverse again. And it's only being stopped by the TVA. It's very muddy, because there's a lot of things about how this works that's not clear, and it's just to keep the mysticism up. It's still to keep... And I could still be interpreting this completely wrong. I don't know. The problem is the show itself has left just enough holes in there for any way for this to be interpreted in a different number of ways. Like I've said, with that opening imagery, that opening shot with the two universes and then the singular time stream inside of one of them, that imagery combined with what we've seen before also contradicts itself. So it's just, I don't know, man. It's a mindfuck. That's all I got to say. It is right now. But if there are multiple TVAs, that means they should occupy the same space. Because they're, again, outside of the time stream, outside of the multiverse. So, like... But then again, you should... Like, again, coming back to this opening imagery, there's another one over there completely doing its own thing. But if it has its own TVA, then there's no reason it can't have already initiated battle with this other one. If that TVA has this Kang the Conqueror, all the while, he's got the same technology, there should already be a war going on. So it has to have only been taken effect. It could have only been born at that moment this Kang lost control of the timeline, or rather gave up control of this timeline, of doing his duty, of doing his job, and put this on our Lokis, who just let it go off into whatever it's doing. So like I don't know. So I don't think we had multiple TVAs before. I don't think there were other universes before, but as of the lightning crack in that moment where he said we crossed the threshold, from that point onward, there's infinite Kangs, possibly infinite TVAs now at this point, infinite universes, and I will at least accept that Loki may indeed be on another alternate reality rather than a timeline in which the TVA was rewritten while the multiverse is expanding around it, which that can still be the case, because taking this Kang out of the equation does allow, like he said, for a new Kang to take his place. And if that is the case, Loki very well may have not went back to the same TVA, but it could still be the only TVA, which would be even more tragic, because that would just mean Mobius's entire character growth and this bond he has with Loki is destroyed. But I don't think they'll do that. I think that was very intentional, and it could have been to throw us off, because a lot of people will be like, well, we have that scene of B-15 and him watching the monitor on our TVA, and then we see them in the archives in the other one where they don't know Loki, they don't recognize Loki. So, like, there you go. There's our two different TVAs. But one could be a before and an after. One could be the TVA just before that timeline takes hold and this new Kang takes the old Kang's slot. I don't know. So there's a lot of things up in the air. I'm not saying I'm right, but and I'm not saying anybody else is wrong, but it's just like there's enough ways that this is open to interpretation until they give us more information about how this is going to go. And this can lead to endless theorizing about what is actually going on, and that's part of the fun of it. And this is just, I'm not doing this. I'm just trying to understand what's going on. But the show itself has also had a lot of contradictory messaging in it, from the Miss Minutes explanation to Kang's explanation, and then the opening imagery of this. It does kind of contradict itself in a few different ways, and there are multiple ways to interpret the different ways that it's been explained to us. So I'm really curious to see if season 2 will hone in on what this really is, what's going on from here, and maybe even Ant-Man Quantumania will wrap into this a little bit. Is the quantum realm outside of the multiverse? Is it part of the multiverse? Doctor Strange is also going to go into it. He's transcended different universes, so he's already kind of traversed it, which again, if that's the case, because he's popped through different universes in his own movie before this happened. So the multiverse, did it already exist, or was Doctor Strange now out of time? Or dude, literally thinking about this is my brain's on fire. I don't like it. I mean, I do like it. It's just it's frustrating because I want to know exactly what is happening, and I'm one of those people that's like, sometimes I can just turn my brain off and not worry about it. But if it's like something I love, something I'm passionate about, something I really enjoy, like the MCU, DC, all this stuff, my brain needs to understand. And sometimes there's not enough pieces, even at the end of the day, even like once something's concluded, sometimes there's not enough information to really kind of satisfy my brain, because there's always going to be well, this and well, that doesn't line up with this, and that my brain's always going to do that. But I'm hoping that this all kind of comes together. Because again, the way it's been explained, the multiverse does not exist at this point. It used to, it was destroyed, but then again, you have Doctor Strange in the first Doctor Strange movie, going through these alternate universes, these other realities that are still parallel. Is that separate? There is a greater omniverse, so if we can take this even farther, there's layers and layers of multiverses. If we want to take it farther, because the comics go into that as well. So it's just like never ending. And I just want to know exactly what the MCU is trying to portray this as, so that we understand the way it works. And that's just where I'm coming at with this. So I'm curious, guys. I know I've got people in the comments that see my point of view on this. We've talked. There's people back me up. And then there's a lot of people that see it a completely different way. So I'm curious. Where do you guys land? How do you feel about all of this, all these shenanigans? How do you think they're going to wrap it all together? Do you think it's just going to go into madness and go into chaos, and we should just cruise for the ride and not worry about it? And I think that's honestly the way we should be. We shouldn't get too hung up on the logistics of how this works. I just think it's fun to try to figure it out. And it's not going to hamper my enjoyment if they go one way or the other. I still liked Endgame, even though there's a couple of elements of their time travel that make no sense. But it's whatever. I do kind of want to rewind a little bit. Because if we do have... Because a lot of people had mentioned, I've seen a couple times in the comments as well, is that the sacred timeline that we're seeing is just the timeline for our universe. But if that's the case, these branching timelines still create their own alternate timelines, their own variant timelines, but they're still connected to our timeline. But those create their own universes by doing that. So are we creating pockets of universes within the multiverse? Some people were saying that it's the branches will cause will veer off, and then those branches will connect to another timeline, and that's what caused the multiversal war. It's like, well, that could contradict what was going on before, because that would have to require that there are multiple Kangs already that are cooperating in other timelines to keep them from contacting each other. So like, that's when it's just like, there's just so, like I said, it's been very unclear about how some of this works. Because you also had the argument that I've seen in the comments as well, that the time stream we've been seeing, or that the TVA has been governing up to this point, has just been the time stream of our universe, and that other universes are still out there with their own time stream and their own TVA. But if that's the case, that means if they have their own TVA, that would also mean that they have their own Kang still, because he would have had to have created that TVA, and that would just mean that they would have made contact and they would have done exactly what Kang described in this and went to war with each other. We can't have all these different timelines already existing parallel to one another, because that contradicts what Kang just said in this episode. So, like, it's one stream. The multiverse does not exist at this point. That is what I'm at least standing by right now, up until Kang said we crossed the threshold and boom, multiverse is born. We might have multiple TVAs now, multiple Kangs for sure. Or we still have a singular TVA because, like we've talked about before, it is outside of the time stream, because like in the comics, it monitors all realities within the multiverse, not just a singular timeline. That's just how it was built in here, because if it only monitored one timeline, they wouldn't be able to enter branches to prune those timelines, because that would in and of itself be another universe. Once that branch is created, creates another universe. So that universe doesn't get its own TVA. It still has the one TVA. But we also just had the one Kang up until this instant. So did we rewrite the TVA that we've come to know, or are we now in a world that has a billion TVAs as well, all occupying the same out of time space, because they, again, are outside of the time stream completely. So they're just neighboring. It's not like they'll be parallel. They're wherever they are in the quantum realm, or wherever the TVA is housed, this pocket dimension outside of time. Do they each have their own pocket dimension? Do they occupy the same non-time temporal space? If you just go to the edge of the TVA and look, do you see another TVA now? I got a lot of questions, and I'm sure everybody does right now too. I mean, there's also a lot of people dead set and confident in their interpretation of it, but I just don't think we have enough information yet on how this multiverse works and how it has been affected by the death of Kang and the disruption of the TVA and this rise of his variants throughout the multiverse. And he himself, he's like, honestly, I don't know what's going to happen from this point. So he doesn't know. We don't know. It's just be open to interpretation for now, and we'll see where it goes. Maybe season 2, we'll dive into it a little bit more, hammer it down a little more solidly. Maybe we'll get a little more of a taste in Quantumanium when they actually do like confront Kang the Conqueror in that. I'm sure they'll address it somewhat in that as well. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting to see, especially bringing in the Watcher. See, I want to know what the Watcher says about all of this, because I think that'll provide us even more clues about how this MCU multiverse is actually going to work. So I'm looking forward to that. That's next month. We'll be reacting to that. So I hope you stick around. I hope you follow through on that journey with me for that as well. So yeah, if you're not already, I hope you subscribe. I hope you like this video, guys. I know it's a little bit of a rambling, and we're going to talk about your questions for me on Saturday, as we always do when we wrap up these shows. We just have a chill live stream for about 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, depending on how much we have to talk about. Saturday, usually about 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come hang out and we'll talk about the show, all the other stuff we cover here on the channel, and I hope to see you there, guys. It's been a fun ride. I think this is probably this has probably been one of the more I had a lot of fun with this show. I had a lot of fun with WandaVision, but I think I found this overall a lot of fun, a lot more fun to kind of play off of. It's hard to pick and choose, man, sometimes. Like, I don't like ranking things too often, but like it's so hard. I like this show a lot. I'll just go with that. I liked it. And it was fun to go along the journey with you guys, so I hope you stick around. That's all I gotta say. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Sound off the comments. Let me know your thoughts down below so we can carry on the conversation after the video. If you want to, you can come join my Discord. Links to that and all my socials are in the description of this video. Guys, I want to shout out our channel legends, Mandy Sherritt, Ryan Karen, Jason Coleman, and Philly Vane. Thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you as always. And yeah, this season, man. Wonder how long we're gonna have to wait till season 2. Anyway, guys, we got plenty of Marvel coming down the pipeline. Cover DC stuff as well. Star Wars, we got a bunch of that coming up in the next couple of months, so it's going to be fun to see how that all goes. So if you want to stick around, I hope you do. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care, everybody.